28, male. Have an older brother, 30, male. And we were pretty close growing up. Then 5 years back, he got married to my sister-in-law, 29. And we sort of grew apart. As a matter of fact, it wasn't just me, but he started distancing himself from our family as a whole after he got married. He'd spend his birthdays with his in-laws and would celebrate with us only a day after, and of course, all the holidays and stuff would be spent with his in-laws without a question. My parents and I found it a little sad that he wouldn't visit us anymore, but then there wasn't much we could say or do, so we just accepted it. His in-laws didn't really like us, so we couldn't exactly join in either. Recently, I got engaged to my long-term girlfriend, 26, of 7 years, and incidentally, we also found out that she was 4 weeks pregnant in the same week. We were thrilled and threw a party to celebrate both the pregnancy and the engagement, and I invited my brother and sister-in-law as well, obviously. Throughout the party, they seemed to be really silent and acted quite suspiciously, constantly whispering amongst themselves and avoiding speaking to anyone else at all. After a while, they finally approached me and asked me if they could speak to me in person and dragged me aside to my bedroom and locked the door. I was very confused since I didn't know what could be so important and personal that they needed to do all of this just to make sure we weren't overheard. Then they started talking, and my sister-in-law told me that they've been trying for a baby as well for quite a while now, and my sister-in-law was also pregnant. I congratulated them, but they didn't look very happy and went on to tell me that they'd been struggling, and so they'd ended up spending a lot of money on IVF and medical bills, which meant that once the baby came along, they'd be in a lot of financial trouble. My sister-in-law had asked her parents and siblings for help, but they'd refused, saying that they needed to save up for themselves. So they suggested that we team up and ask my parents for money since they could definitely afford it. My dad's a retired heart surgeon and my mom was a journalist, so they made a pretty comfortable living. They have saved up a significant amount over the years, so yes, they can afford to help us out. But I like to believe that they've raised us to be responsible enough to earn and spend our money in a way that doesn't require us to ask for help in the first place. And the way that my brother wanted to get the money was even worse than what I thought. They were too proud to just go and ask for the money, so they'd wanted me to ask on their behalf and claim that I was the one struggling. My brother had constantly snubbed our family for the past 2 years after his marriage, so he knew that if he asked, it'd be really awkward and humiliating for him, which is why he wanted to avoid it and was sending me ahead. He wanted me to ask for twice the amount that they needed so that we could split the money between the two of us, since he knew that our parents would never turn me away, especially if I was in trouble. And even if they didn't give us twice the amount, we'd still probably get something at least, and that would be enough for them. I was shocked that they were even suggesting this, because our parents had always treated both of us equally, even though my brother had pretty much stopped speaking to us after his marriage. So to try and dupe them into paying us such a huge amount of money was just so low and disgusting that I couldn't even bring myself to respond to what they were suggesting for a good few seconds. My brother, who'd always been a good son, was now suddenly trying to cover up his own faults and was even willing to lie so that his ego wouldn't suffer a blow. After a few minutes, I told them straight away that I wasn't going to be part of their disgusting attempt at fooling our parents, and no way in hell was I being the scapegoat for something as stupid as this. Not just that, I also went on to tell my brother that I'd been considering making him a partner in the new business that I was starting, but after what he just suggested, that was never going to happen. I've been planning to start my own shipping business since I have experience in that particular industry. I'd thought about starting after our engagement, but had some second thoughts about it when I learned that we were pregnant. My fiancée, however, pushed me to go for it, and since she's a working woman too, she told me not to worry about the cash flow. Plus, now, with the baby on the way, there was no better time since the stars seemed to be aligning for us. I already had some investors, and my dad was also lending us some seed money. So we were all sorted, and by the time the baby was born, we'd be well established. I'd been planning to ask my brother since he was a business major and had good grades in college. Also, he didn't seem to be happy with his current job because of the salary, and he felt that he deserved more, which I could do for him. But then, after what he and his wife suggested, I had no intention of making him a part of my business or my life. My brother was stunned when he realized what I said and that his own suggestion had just cost him a business opportunity, and immediately attempted to take it all back, saying that he was just joking and he didn't actually mean any of it. But I knew the truth. I told him that they could stay for the duration of the party because it was a happy occasion, and I didn't want to ruin the vibe. But after that, we were done. I didn't want to speak to them or hear from them ever again, and my decision was final. Then I got up and left and didn't even look back, even when they requested me to rethink my decision. Thankfully, they didn't say anything for the rest of the party, but kept trying to pull me aside again and again, which did raise a few questions. After everyone left, I told my fiancé what had happened and why exactly my brother and sister-in-law had been trying to talk to me. She was also appalled at their suggestion and told me that I did the right thing by declining and deciding to go no contact with them. But that's not where it ended, because the very next day my brother dropped by again and asked me to help him out. He said that I owe this to him because of all that he's done for me my entire life. I was confused because he'd never really done anything for me, at least financially, so I asked him what he meant by that. And he told me that back in college he'd agreed to not attend his first choice since our parents had said that that one was way too expensive and they wouldn't be able to afford the best colleges for both of us. So apparently he had to compromise and ended up going to college closer to home in spite of being accepted to the one he actually wanted to go to, just so that I could attend the college of my choice. When he told me that, I felt really awful and guilty, which was probably what my brother wanted in the first place anyway. He told me that I could either agree to the plan that he and sister-in-law had come up with, or I could make him a partner like I'd intended to earlier and give me 3 days to think about it. I'm on the second day now, and the guilt is eating away at me, honestly. I didn't even know that my brother had made such a huge sacrifice for me, but then his so-called plan is incredibly cruel, and I absolutely do not want to go through with it. Our parents have always been kind to us, and I don't want to be the kind of person who tricks and lies to their own parents just for the sake of money. And about the business, I don't think I want to make him my partner anymore, because in spite of his business acumen, the way he's behaving right now is just not acceptable, and with a baby on the way, I don't want to risk anything. I've spoken to my fiancée, and she's just as lost and confused as I am about what to do in a situation like this. I mean, I can still just choose not to help him out in spite of the whole college sacrifice that he told me about, but that would just not sit right with my conscience. I don't know what to do at this point. So, what if I decided not to help my brother out now? Update 1. It's been 3 days since I posted here, and on the third day, my brother did get in touch with me to ask about my decision. I told him that I needed some more time to think about it, and while he did sound annoyed about it, he did agree to it. But I didn't need time to think. I just wanted to speak to my parents about what he told me. I couldn't just shake off the feeling that my brother wasn't being entirely truthful with me. So I decided to visit my parents and ask them about the whole college thing that my brother had told me about, and they just confirmed my suspicions. He had indeed been lying about sacrificing his college of choice for my sake. They told me that he hadn't even been accepted into that college in the first place, and my brother had demanded that they help him bribe his way somehow into being accepted. When they declined, he got upset and started accusing them of favoring me over him, and they got into a huge fight about this whole thing, and I think that's when they started growing apart. Then, in college, he met his wife, and that made matters even worse and effectively put an end to any hope of reconciliation because my sister in law was only interested in adding fuel to the fire. I think my brother had made it seem like he was the less favored son between the two of us, and that had led my sister in law to believe that my family and I wouldn't pass up any opportunity to take money from him. Her family owns a restaurant and they're extremely materialistic, so her concern regarding my brother's and family's financial status wasn't surprising. She didn't want my brother contributing to his own family financially under any circumstances whatsoever, so she made sure that my brother stayed away from us. After learning this, I was really glad that I hadn't given in to my brother's demands because once again I realized that he'd been lying to me and trying to fool me as well. I was furious that he'd even thought that this was something that he could get away with and immediately blocked him on every platform that I could. I also told my parents about the plan that my brother and his wife had come up with and warned them to not lend him any money. What's really disappointing is that my parents told me that they wouldn't have had any issue with lending my brother the money had he just asked for it, but he just had to come up with some elaborate plan to deceive them and make things worse for himself. It's been 2 days since I learnt the truth, and when my brother couldn't get through to me, he made my sister-in-law contact me instead, but I've blocked her as well. So now they've started bothering my fiancé. She's not very bothered about any of this, though, and has been treating this situation as a joke. I'm glad she can take this thing lightly and make it funny because I'm just too pissed off about what they've been trying to do. I hope they realize their mistake and have some shame and stay away from us now because if they even dare to show up again, they're going to hear it from me. Update 2. When my fiancé and I stopped responding, my brother and his wife had the audacity to show up at our house. That's right, they visited us this morning, and they seemed to be in a foul mood, which pretty much ruined the day for us as well. He barged into our house in spite of my fiancé telling him that we didn't want to speak to them, and that made me mad because this was my house, and he had no right to be pushing us around like this. So I told him right away that I wasn't going to help him in any way whatsoever since he'd proven time and again that he was a dishonest and selfish guy with no respect or regard for anyone, not even his own family. He seemed a little taken aback by my outburst and asked me what I was talking about. So I told him that I'd already talked to Mom and Dad and I knew that he'd made that whole college thing up just to make me feel guilty and manipulate me into giving him either the money or the position. Even after that, he and his wife had the audacity to continue arguing with me. Their defense was that, in a way, the only reason my brother wasn't able to attend the college of his choice was because my parents wouldn't resort to unfair means and buy his way in, and eventually that money that they refused to spend on him went into my education, so he wasn't really lying. I couldn't believe that this was their argument. It was almost laughable how hard they were trying to make it sound like our parents had been unfair to him or whatever. I'd been accepted into the college of my choice fair and square, and I even had a scholarship, so technically our parents had to spend less on my education than on his. Moreover, they were the ones who'd never give our parents the love and respect that they deserved and were now even trying to dupe them, which was just so sickening. Had my brother and my sister-in-law just been good people who didn't just distance themselves from my parents for petty reasons, then they wouldn't even be stuck in this situation in the first place. I told my brother what my dad had told me when I spoke to him last about how he still would have given him the money had he just swallowed his false pride and had the decency to ask for it like a normal person. At least then he had the sense to look at least a little ashamed of himself. But his wife kept arguing that after so many years, there's no way our father would have agreed to it, and he just said that for the sake of it, to make them look like the bad guys, which was a really stupid thing to say because none of us had to try to make them look like the bad guys in this situation. They just were. My brother and his wife couldn't just forget about their massively inflated egos for once and ask our parents for help, and that was somehow supposed to be everyone's fault but their own. After a while, I got tired of arguing with them since I'd realized that there was no point trying to explain why they were so wrong here, so I asked them to leave and stop bothering us. My brother got mad when I said that and called me a selfish brat and a lot of other things as well, which was really hurtful because, like I said, we'd grown up as the best of friends. I don't know how he got so lost along the way, but now it feels like I don't know him at all. He left after a lot of screaming and fighting, and it's been a few hours since that happened, so I've managed to calm myself down considerably, but obviously, I still feel awful about what happened. I can't see a way out of this which doesn't end with me and my brother never speaking to each other ever again. In all probability, my parents are also going to cut him off for good now because of his utter lack of morals and ethics. My fiancée has been wonderful and is trying her very best to distract me from all that's going on right now, and I'm just so grateful for that. I think that in a while, I'm going to call my parents up and tell them about what my brother said. It'll hurt them, that's for sure, but they have every right to know what kind of person he is. Update 3. So I contacted my parents half an hour ago and told them whatever had happened in the morning. They weren't surprised in the least and were mostly disappointed with his behavior. I could hear my mom crying in the background while my dad tried to comfort her, and my heart broke for them because my mom blamed herself for how he turned out. I don't think they could have done anything better to avoid this, though, and this is completely on my brother himself. We grew up in the same house with the same rules and were treated just the same, and I turned out fine. I don't know what happened to him. My dad wasn't very kind about the whole fiasco, though, and sounded very angry on the phone while I told him the things that my sister-in-law had said, while my brother just went along with it. He told me that he knew what to do now and was muttering something about this being the last straw for him, but when I asked, he told me not to think about it and focus on my work and family instead. I guess I'll take his advice and do just that and try to stay away from any more of my brother's unnecessary drama. Update 4. Hey guys, it's been 4 days since the last update, and today my brother came by once more. This time he wasn't as aggressive and was on his own, with no sister-in-law in tow. After the last meeting we had, I was kind of wary of him to say the least, but he seemed a lot more rational this time, so I was still willing to speak to him. He informed me that Dad's lawyer had called him up a day ago to tell him that he wouldn't be inheriting anything apart from a couple of antique watches that my dad had bought when he was younger. So basically no money for my brother in case my dad passed away, and I know he was trying not to show it on his face, but he was definitely scared out of his wits. He told me that he needed my help to make it up to Dad and beg for forgiveness so that he would undo this decision. I was kind of hesitant because I didn't even know what I was supposed to do in a situation like this. I did feel bad for him, but then again, all of this was his own fault. He wanted me to accompany him to our parents' house and side with him so that Dad wasn't as hard on him. I highly doubt that my presence will make any difference since I'm the one who told Dad about all this drama in the first place. But just because he seemed so desperate, I agreed to this and went with him. As soon as our father saw him in the doorway, his face lost all traces of kindness, and he told my brother to get the hell out that very instant. He didn't even give him a chance to argue or explain himself and completely humiliated him before he'd even set foot in the house. It was only after my mother and I requested him to at least wait until we were inside the house that he let him in, and still looking mad. My brother wasted no time in beginning to apologize for whatever he'd said to me about them and said that his head had been turned by his wife. I thought it was particularly low to blame it all on his wife when they were both equally at fault. His wife had obviously forced him to abandon his own family, but it was eventually his choice to do so. And when her family turned their backs on them, they came crawling back to us. Even then, they didn't have the common courtesy to at least apologize for the way he'd been so distant with us, constantly choosing her family over his own. If anything, he was worse than his wife because at least she'd stuck with her family. Anyway, my mother seemed to melt a little at his apology, but my dad was not that soft. He told him straight away that if money was what he needed, then he'd have to work for it. He couldn't lie and cheat his way to get what he wanted. He had the chance to just ask for it, but he'd blown it way back, so now he had no other option but to work for what he wanted. I didn't know where he was going with this, but then my dad told him that the only way he'd be able to do that was to work under me once I started my own business. At first, he was totally against it and wanted to be made an equal partner, but like I had said initially, I've almost no trust in him, so that was out of the question. I wouldn't even be willing to hire him unless my dad hadn't come up with that solution, but just to honor my parents, I agreed to offer him a job. I was the one supposed to keep an eye on him and make sure he was doing his work honestly and sincerely. Any funny business at all, and he'd not only lose his job, but also his entire inheritance. This is what my father came up with, and honestly, he's getting off pretty easy because he's getting a second chance at redeeming himself as a human being, which is honestly pretty rare. He's definitely not very happy about it, that's for sure. I can't blame him either. Having to work for your little brother isn't probably the ideal situation for anyone, but if he wants the money, then he'll have to work for it fair and square. Dad's also agreed to send him some money for the time being to take care of his needs at the moment, which is also really kind of him after whatever has happened. I hope that my brother takes his chance and this job seriously and doesn't waste it. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.